All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a medical mystery that starts with something incredibly common, a meal, and can end in a way that is just completely unexpected.
So let's just jump right in. I mean, think about it. How can something as common as food poisoning, you feel awful for a few days and then you're fine, how can that, for some people, lead to sudden, debilitating paralysis? It sounds wild, right? But it happens. And that's the puzzle we're going to piece together today.
Okay, so to solve any mystery, you've got to have a suspect. And in this case, our prime suspect is a microscopic culprit, a bacterium. And get this, it's not some rare, exotic bug. It's actually the #1 cause of bacterial gut infections on the entire planet.
And here it is, Campylobacter jejuni. Yeah, I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but you're going to want to remember that name. This little organism, this tiny bacterium, is the most common cause of bacterial food poisoning in the world. And that distinctive shape you see, kind of like a comma or a gull's wing, that's actually our very first clue in this whole story.
So let's build out the criminal profile for this thing. We've got the shape, right? The gull wing. But it's also super mobile, just zipping around with this unique darting motion. It's a bit of a specialist, too. It really likes places without a lot of oxygen. But here's the kicker, the detail you really need to file away. It loves heat. Its perfect temperature is 42 degrees Celsius. That's about 107 Fahrenheit. And trust me, that number is key.
Okay, so where does this little heat lover hang out? Well, a whopping 60% of the time, the answer is undercooked poultry. And remember that magic number, 42 degrees Celsius? Well, guess what the internal body temperature of a chicken is? Yep, pretty much exactly that. It makes them the perfect home, the perfect host for this bacterium. Now sure, you can get it from other places. Contaminated water, unpasteurized milk, but undercooked chicken is, without a doubt, the main offender. All right, let's talk about the initial sickness, the part of the story that's probably pretty familiar to a lot of us. For most people who get infected, it just plays out like a classic, nasty case of food poisoning. The official name for it is campylobacteriosis.
And the timeline is pretty much what you'd expect. You eat something contaminated, let's say that dodgy chicken sandwich, and then for the next 2 to 5 days, nothing happens. That's the incubation period. Then, bam, the symptoms hit. But here's the important part for most people. It's what we call self-limiting. It runs its course in about a week, your body fights it off, and that's it. Story's over. You move on.
And the symptoms, they are not fun. We're talking really bad diarrhea, awful abdominal cramps, fever, nausea, vomiting, the whole 9 yards. It's a miserable week, for sure. But, and this is crucial, for more than 99% of people, this is where the story ends. They get better, it's over. But what happens to that other tiny fraction of a percent? Because this is where everything changes. This is where the story takes a hard left turn into something much, much scarier. For a very small, very unlucky group of people, the fight isn't over just because their stomach feels better. A whole new chapter is just getting started, and it is way worse.
Just look at that number, 0.3 per 1,000 infections. It sounds incredibly rare, right? Less than 1 in 1,000. But you have to remember, Campylobacter causes millions and millions of infections around the world every single year. So suddenly that tiny, tiny fraction starts to look like a very real number of people whose lives are about to be completely flipped upside down.
And this terrifying complication has a name. It's called Guillain-Barré Syndrome. You'll often hear it called GBS. And here is the absolute mind-bending twist. GBS is not an infection. The bacteria are gone. This is an autoimmune disorder. It's your own body's immune system, the very system that just saved you from the food poisoning, making a terrible, catastrophic mistake and attacking your own nerves. And the link between the two is rock solid. I mean, GBS can be triggered by other things, sure, but our culprit, Campylobacter, is the #1 trigger. It's responsible for starting the cascade in about 1/3 of all GBS cases. So that brings us to the million-dollar question. How? How on earth does a simple stomach bug trick your immune system into waging war on itself? And that right there, that's the real howdunit of our mystery. We've got our suspects, we know the awful outcome. Now we need to connect the dots. We need to understand the mechanism,
How does this actually play out?
The whole thing hinges on this incredible and frankly terrifying biological concept called molecular mimicry. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a biological case of mistaken identity. The bacteria are wearing a disguise and your immune system falls for it.
Okay, let's walk through this step by step. 1. You get the Campylobacter infection. 2. Your immune system goes into overdrive, creating these little protein soldiers called antibodies to hunt down and kill the bacteria. Now here's step 3, the critical point of failure. The outer shell of the bacteria just so happens to look almost exactly like the outer shell of your own nerve cells. It's an unbelievable coincidence. So in step 4, your antibodies, still on high alert and looking for any leftover bacteria to kill, see your healthy nerves and they can't tell the difference. They mistake your nerves for the enemy and they attack. It's friendly fire turned against your own nervous system.
And the consequences of that attack? That's what GBS is. It's this rapid progressive weakness. And it's symmetrical, meaning it happens on both sides of your body at the same time. Typically, it starts in your legs and just creeps its way up. You lose your reflexes, like the knee-jerk reflex, and for a scary number of people, about 20 to 30%, that paralysis keeps moving up until it hits the muscles you use to breathe. And at that point, it becomes a true medical emergency.
You know, to really get a handle on what makes GBS so unique, it helps to compare it to something like polio, which most people have heard of. The differences are really telling. GBS weakness is symmetrical, both sides. Polio is often patchy or asymmetric. With GBS, you can get tingling or numbness, but with polio, there's no sensory loss. But the biggest difference is the cause. GBS is your own immune system attacking you. Polio is a virus directly invading and killing your nerve cells. Two totally different mechanisms.
So, you've got this patient getting weaker by the hour. How do doctors figure out for sure that this is GBS? And what in the world can they do to stop this internal assault?
Well, the diagnosis comes down to a few key pieces of evidence. A spinal tap is a big one. They look at the fluid around your brain and spinal cord, and there's a telltale sign. The protein levels are through the roof, but the number of white blood cells is totally normal. It's such a classic finding it even has a fancy name, albumin cytologic dissociation. Then they do nerve tests that show the electrical signals are slowing way down. And they can even run blood tests to find those specific rogue antibodies that are causing all the trouble. When it comes to treatment, it's a two-pronged attack. First, you have to stop the immune system's rampage. They do this with either IVIG, which is basically an infusion of donated antibodies that help calm everything down, or a process called plasmapheresis, where they literally filter the patient's blood to remove the bad antibodies. The second part is just intense supportive care, watching their breathing, their heart, everything. Oh, and here's a really interesting point. Steroids, which are used for a ton of other autoimmune diseases, don't work here. In fact, they can actually make things worse.
Look, I know this all sounds absolutely terrifying, but we have to circle back to the beginning. This whole horrifying chain of events starts with a really common and, more importantly, a really preventable infection. So let's finish with the most important part, how you can avoid this whole mess in the first place. And thankfully, the playbook here is pretty simple. 4 basic steps. 1, cook your chicken all the way through. Don't eyeball it, use a meat thermometer and make sure it hits 165 Fahrenheit or 74 Celsius. 2, just stay away from unpasteurized or raw milk. 3, basic kitchen hygiene. Wash your hands, wash your cutting boards, don't let raw chicken touch your salad. You know the drill. And 4, if you're ever camping or traveling and you're not sure about the water, boil it. That's it. These 4 things can stop this whole nightmare scenario before it even has a chance to start.
Which really brings us full circle, doesn't it? Our immune system is our greatest defender. It is this incredibly complex, brilliant system that keeps us alive. But what happens when that brilliant programming goes wrong? When a simple case of mistaken identity, of molecular mimicry, turns our best defense into our worst enemy? It's a humbling and powerful question to think about.